Good afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that we hope will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid. Here's my co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello. Has your information been hacked?
I don't know. I know there's been so many hacks over the decades, and there's a big one that I think you're about to share with our audience. I think you don't even know, Dave, until something happens.
I'm willing to absolutely guarantee that 95 or 98% of the people listening to this have their information somewhere on the dark web.
Hmm.
And to talk about the latest one.
Yeah, well, some apparently a background checking company called National Public Data just got breached, and nearly 3 billion people, Dave. They got the records of 3 billion people. Come on. That's like half the planet. That's incredible.
Well, it's only 3/8 of the planet, but
Oh,
it's close enough.
okay.
And it's probably 90% of the people who listen to this show because they presumably got everybody anywhere on the internet or hacked in the United States. And can you imagine 3 billion people all sitting in one database? Sure, the National Security Agency has that, and the Chinese have that, and the Russians have that, and probably the Iranians and the Koreans, but it's hard to find out what's going there. But a private company that'll sell it for almost anyone
That's
who asks.
that's crazy. Right. In addition to them being breached, they're holding the data for sale. Dave, you're right. That's what they do with it. And they collect the data from all kind of sources apparently from according to the story that I saw, it says they scrape personally identifiable information of individuals from non-public sources. So they're all over the web looking for information about people, and who knows what they do with it. Well, we do know what they do. They sell it. That's what they do with it. And but in this particular breach, Dave, the $3 billion people database went up for sale on the dark web for $3.5 million. Somebody's actually trying to sell the complete database.
That
That's
well, 3.5 million is what, a penny for each of 3 billion, 2 cents
yeah,
is
something like that. Yeah.
that's what your information is worth. Now, in people who do this kind of thing, presumably will happily scam you. So they may be claiming 3 billion when they only have 1 billion,
Hmm.
but it shows what to worry about. There's a lot of fake stuff out there, but that's the next story.
Hmm. Yeah, but in the meantime, this is a huge hack. And yes, I mean, just the fact that there is a private company out there that has this kind of database. Never mind the fact that it was hacked, but the company has this kind of database. 3 billion people, something called the National Public Data. And
This is according to a printed report that hasn't been confirmed, but sounded highly likely.
mhm.
It's nobody's got a hold of the company to say, do you really have this for sale?
Hmm.
Although probably there's going to be a reporter getting to them soon.
Yeah. They said it's the biggest data breach since apparently back in 2013. Yahoo had a huge data breach somewhere around 3 billion records uh, that were stolen in a cyber attack. So this is the biggest attack in something like 10 years, 12 years. So it's a big deal. So, but to your question, Dave, how would you know that your data has been hacked? I mean, I think you're right that your data has been stolen, I should say. I think you're probably right. You almost got to assume that it has been.
You don't get to numbers in the billions without getting almost everybody.
Yeah.
When you think of Yahoo back then, probably 3/4 of the people in the United States, sometime or other, signed into Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
Now that didn't get Social Security numbers, but those databases are out there and can be cross-checked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Crazy. But that's the world we live in, Dave. Um, so now there's a lot going on in terms of just hacking and misinformation and false information being out there. Where did you want to go next? There's so much going on. I know there's I just was hearing some of the crazy news feeds yesterday about the ex-president guy talking about that Kamala Harris's crowd sizes were AI generated, which is, crazy. We saw it on live TV and, thousands and thousands of people. But this is the world that we live in where even when stuff is not AI generated and fake, real stuff is being accused of being fake. I mean, how are we going to navigate our way through that, Dave? This is pretty scary times we live in terms of the media and its credibility.
There's no good answer to that, partly because almost everyone in politics, well, as I.F. Stone taught my generation of reporters, all governments lie.
Mhm.
And listeners can probably guess our opinion of the Republican candidate, which is why I want to start with talking about what the Democrats have been saying. There's $50 billion that are being given in chip subsidies in order to create chip factories in the United States for national security reasons, presumably. And I just saw one came right out of the White House saying $50 billion of chip factories and similar due to the subsidy. Utter and total nonsense. Most of that money went to factories that would have been bought anyway. Why do I say that so clearly? Well, before they started the program to get that $50 billion in subsidies, Intel had already announced the $40 or $60 billion they were going to spend in the next few years building new plants. And now they got $5 billion from the government to help them build those new plants, but they were going to build them anyway. The money didn't make it happen. And that's true again and again when I look at government subsidies.
Well, where does this money come from, Dave? Is this congressionally authorized spending?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Big bill. Everybody in the Senate and the House said, we got to catch up. We can't be vulnerable to China and Taiwan. Think what happens if the Chinese invade Taiwan. And that's where all our chips come from, including for our airplanes and missiles. That's true, although I put it a different way when I first noticed this and started writing about it. It was about 6 years ago. And there was a lot of politics happening over Taiwan, so it was definitely something to worry about. But it wasn't until 2 or 3 years later that the US and allies basically went on a war footing in Taiwan. So I said, well, Taiwan is in an earthquake zone, and that could destroy all the factories. So you have to have a contingency plan not to be vulnerable to Taiwan to avoid earthquake problems.
So how does Intel fit into this, though, Dave? I mean, Intel is a U.S. company. Are they based overseas in Asia as well? How does the Intel funding coincide or interface with what you're talking about in China?
Intel is a California and Oregon company with plants around the world. They're very big in Israel. They're big in Singapore. And they have more factories producing chips in the United States than anyone else.
Mm.
They've been having problems because the technology was working very poorly for a number of years, and they fell behind the Taiwanese. They thought some stuff would work that didn't, and they all but bet the company, which is why now the stock price is down at historic lows. They took massive losses, and Intel's had a lot of things go wrong. Maybe it would be worth lending them the money to build the factories if we want factories in the US. They're still very strong. Tens of thousands of engineers around the world work for Intel, including some of the very best. Now, does it make sense to subsidize that? I don't know. False electioneering is what I put it here. Obviously, Biden is putting out all the announcements, or Biden and Harris are putting out all the announcements because of the coming election. One of the things this week was just ridiculous.
What was that?
As you were saying, there was live TV footage of the thousands of people welcoming Kamala Harris at the airport.
Mm. The
Republican candidate against her has said the pictures were all faked. Reuters wrote up a similar story, pointing out that their reporters were there and so were their photographers. They believe there really was a big crowd. But fake news. In the second case, which got picked up a lot, it was from a satire site that said it was a parody site and had parody in its name. But people picked it up and said, Harris is lying about the crowds.
Mm.
And well, that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
And if I had answers to how you deal with it, well, I'd be much happier, but I don't.
Yeah, about that. Well, we're dealing with a guy who I'm talking about that guy that's running for president who back in I guess it was 2016, just outright told everybody that what you see is not what you see. Don't believe your lying ass eyes. Believe me. Talking about his inaugural crowds, and then for him to have the gall to say recently that his crowd at the insurrection, by the way, the January 6th insurrection, was larger than Martin Luther King's crowd on the Capitol grounds in 1963. This guy's just outrageous. I guess the more outrageous to lie, maybe the more legs it has. It's just unbelievable.
30 or 40% of the United States believes him on things like that.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
I can't explain it. I can't explain it. Other than say some kind of cult worship. That 30 to 40% is following that guy around no matter what he does or what he says. They're giving him, they're with him. So it's not rational in my mind.
It's not rational
Mm-hmm.
to believe something that's untrue, but most of us do. Almost all of us do. And this is something that over the last 20 or 30 years, the psychologists and the economists have been proving right and left that they're on this particular bias is called confirmation bias. And what they found with loads of experiments by people around the world, academics around the world, is that when you see a story that agrees with you, you notice it and believe it. If you see a story that disagrees with what you think, it just runs away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you never heard it. It couldn't be true. And that kind of bias distorts truth constantly. And all governments lie. Remember the Vietnam War and things like the Gulf of Tonkin claims, and how many lies the government put out at that time? Three governments, Kennedy's, Johnson's, and Nixon's, lied right and left. And that was why the Pentagon Papers were so important, because the Pentagon Papers was a government-affiliated study that really looked hard at what the facts were and pointed out that the government was lying. We had so much more hope in those days that things were going to get better. And it's really hard to look back over the last 50 years and think they may have gotten worse. And the corporations. I remember personal experience when a company like Verizon did something that was despicable or just wrong. They were worried about their public image and fixed it. Verizon and Spectrum, I just saw, are ripping off and putting out false information on a scale that would embarrass any politician. It's that bad. I had a friend who, when I heard what Verizon wanted to charge her, which was $720 for the first year, I said, what? And got involved and spent 2 hours on the phone with Verizon people until at the end of it, they confirmed that what my friend should have been charged was $120, not $720. There were two clear parts to how they did that. The first thing is she was entitled, she had ACP, which was the government subsidy, and Verizon put out the good news that they would give anybody who lost ACP, they were going to give free service for 6 months, which was just customer acquisition. They didn't want to lose those customers. They'll give them 6 months and charge them after that.
ACP, of course, being the Affordable Connectivity Plan that the FCC came up with about 4 years ago to help subsidize and provide essentially free broadband service. But go ahead, Dave.
So when it was disappearing, the companies wanted to hold on to the customers and made a lot of offers. In Verizon's case, they said, next 6 months free, or we're going to charge you for the years after that. The other one was even more pain, and it wasn't on their website. It was on the PR that they made the announcement. But when you look to Verizon and looked on their website for what plans you could get, there was nothing about that service. And then when I called up and said she should have got that service, and they said, oh no. And as I say, I spent 2 hours till finally a supervisor confirmed I was right, because among other things, I did have the Verizon press release that offered the 6 months free service and made it look like Verizon was doing reasonable things for people.
Yeah. Well, the corporations are so greedy. And as you said, Dave, they're no longer embarrassed by it. I mean, it used to be back, a few decades ago, that they were at least had a decorum of civility with how they approach customers, but no more. One of the, I just ran across another story. You're talking about the ACP, Affordable Connectivity Plan, and internet costs and costs that these giant, monopolistic providers are charging. Verizon and Comcast et al., they are requesting that the U.S. Supreme Court strike down a New York law that mandates affordable pricing for low-income consumers. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, low-income consumers and these guys, they've got no shame. That law should be struck down according to the major service providers.
Now,
Yeah.
why should it be struck down? They're giving various arguments designed to appeal to the conservatism of the Supreme Court.
Mm.
But when it first got, but they're saying why, for public purposes, it should be struck down. Well, the little phone companies upstate can't afford to give discounted prices to those with less money. And we have to protect the 5% or so of the little phone companies, of the people served by the little phone
Oh yeah,
companies.
I believe that, Dave. Come on, come on. That is so disingenuous an argument that these huge conglomerates who would put those small companies out of business if they could are trying to protect them with this move to the Supreme Court. I mean, it's ludicrous. But now, Dave, break down just briefly. You know, I know that there's some net neutrality rules that have been put into effect that are being challenged, and one of the issues here that relates to this law for New York State, where the law currently requires that there be a $20 a month price point for eligible consumers. You know, much to your point about how they hide all the prices, you probably can't even find it on most of their websites, but there is a New York State law that says that. But now there's a battle back and forth. Apparently, the net neutrality laws are under review by the Supreme Court, and I think there's a stay. And if the net neutrality rule is going to affect, the states cannot prevail in terms of price control, but because that puts them under Title II regulation. But if the net neutrality rules are not upheld, then it's Title I regulation, and the states can price control. Did I say that right, Dave?
Well, I could spend the whole rest of the show and still not explain all of what's going on in this stuff and Chevron deference and other things that went to the Supreme Court. The takeaway, if you're not into the details of something like this, and you shouldn't be, is that the judges that were appointed by the Republicans, including those who lost 2 elections but became president anyway, are really having an impact. And we know what happened to the abortion laws. And there's way more coming, some of which will make the headlines, and some of which you only know about if you follow them closely.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember when, every election since the year 2000, people were warning, what if these guys whose decisions always seem to always go with the corporations got elected president and they could appoint Supreme Court judges? We weren't wrong at the time. But as I say, all governments lie. And I could find half a dozen cases of false claims being made by Trump's opponent, Kamala Harris. I don't have any answers to any of that, unfortunately. One more you want to bring up before we go to the break, I think.
Well,
go to the Olympics, because that's what people
yes.
want to hear about.
More disinformation and if you will, online harassment. Young lady, gold medal winner, I believe, by the name of Iman Khalif, Olympic boxing champion, female Olympic boxing champion, filed a complaint in France following online harassment after a rain of criticism and false claims about her sex during the Olympics. Apparently,
it wasn't just criticism. It was ugly, obscene comments all over the web, as happens to many, many women. France, hate speech like that is illegal. So what did she do?
She filed a complaint with the government. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but she filed a complaint with the government. It looks like they're going to hold some sort of hearing, or at least an investigation, to see what it's all about. But in the meantime, this woman has been accused of being a transgender. She's been accused of being a man, and all this stuff has just kind of been peddled on the internet following her win. And I don't know how you control that, Dave. She filed a claim with the government, but we've talked about combating online hate speech and aggravated cyber harassment, as some folks call it. And it's a very tricky thing to regulate and to combat.
And the US and Europe have different laws. In the US, it's very hard to win a case on anything like this, on hate speech, including terrible things. Mm-hmm. Europe, it has a history of the opposite. You couldn't sell and you couldn't put on the internet Hitler's Mein Kampf in Germany. Is that right or wrong? Does that abuse free speech? Does it matter that my grandfather, the Orthodox rabbi, had a copy of Mein Kampf on his shelves? I asked him when I was a little boy, why? And he said, we have to understand it. But it would have been illegal in Germany at that time.
Yeah, and for some of the young folks who might not know what Mein Kampf is, that was Hitler's manifesto. So Dave's grandpa insisted on having access to that so he could know what that crazy guy was talking about. So, I mean, again, it's a slippery slope trying to regulate speech on the internet. But Dave, we got to take a break.
Before we take a break,
yeah.
10, 15 seconds on the other half of this. So that's illegal in Europe. What is Elon Musk company says? Well, Europe enforcing their laws against hate speech is unacceptable because we're in America and European law doesn't apply here. And the Europeans were overreaching, saying they should be able to enforce their law in Europe. Well, I don't have any comment on that. Let's take our break.
Yeah, we will. And that Elon Musk guy and that debacle last night, we'll maybe talk about that briefly when we come back. You're listening to Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, with Stu Reid and Dave Burstein. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief musical break.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day. It's a new life for me, yeah. It's a new dawn, it's a new day. It's a new life for me. Woo, 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 woo. And I'm feeling good. Fish in the sea, you know how I feel. River running free, you know how I feel. Blossom on the tree, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, and I'm feeling good. Dragonfly out in the sun, you know what I mean, don't you know? Butterflies all having fun, you know what I mean. Sleep in peace when day is done, that's what I mean. And this old world is a new world and a bold world for me. when you shine, you know how I feel. Scent of the pine, you know how I feel. Oh, freedom is mine, and I know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me. I'm feeling
Okay, we're back. Community Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid here on WHCR 90.3 FM. Dave, there's a recent story just came out. You know, it's hard not to talk about AI because it's infiltrating so many aspects of our lives. But this one story is talking about falling in love with AI chatbots, and it's actually written by OpenAI, one of the big purveyors of AI, warning users about becoming emotionally hooked on its voice mode. I mean, what's going on here, Dave? I know we've talked previously about avatars and folks creating friendships with avatars and talking to avatars as companions. Is this more of that, or is this something else that's going on with this latest caution coming out of OpenAI?
It is both more of that and worth another story, because what's happening quietly in the background is a lot of serious people, including professional studies by psychologists, are finding that people are relating emotionally to their AIs. And a lot of them think that is a good thing. What? Well, one of the things that I read lately was a story about 3 different studies that showed if you don't have professional help or anyone who can help you in crises or when you really need counseling, going to an AI counselor does help. One study which stretched their data said it even reduced suicidal thoughts significantly.
Wait, say that again, Dave. You're saying talking to an AI counselor, which is a simulated person, if you will, helped reduce suicide? Is that what I just heard you say?
That was a study that came out of Stanford,
Mm-hmm.
and it definitely showed that some of the students who went to the computer counseling were helped. It was stretching when it said, and the 5% of suicidal ideation was helped by this computer counseling. I don't know what suicidal ideation is. They didn't have number of people who did and didn't connect suicide compared to a control group, which would have been really significant. And it seemed pretty soft. I didn't accept the proof there. But what we're seeing now is independent studies by academics who are not affiliated with the people offering counseling that says it does help some people. Now, if you were really disturbed, walked into an emergency room in your town, in Westchester, what do you think the chances are that you will get a good counselor to help you after they sent you home and the support you needed?
I say slim to none would be my guess on that. You know, traditional healthcare is very poor when it comes to emotional and psychological counseling. That's been my experience. They're great at treating traumatic injury, traumatic stress, but emotional stress, emotional injury, very poor, especially coming out of a hospital referral system.
Well, yes and no. It's certainly true that, for example, if you go into Mount Sinai Hospital, they had training psychiatry residents, and they will follow up with you to the extent most psychiatrists do, which is mostly just handing out pills. And serious counseling is very rare because it's expensive. Insurance companies usually don't pay for it. And the result is, if they did pay for it, there's certainly not enough counselors, whether psychiatrists or clergy, available for what the need is. A lot of people get stressed out. An enormous number. I saw a figure, I haven't checked it out, that 20% of the people in the United States take antidepressants.
Wow.
Because a lot of doctors just hand them out like candy.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in, they want to do something. It helps some people, but, and I'm speaking of experience here, having depression and being on all the pills, and luckily enough to have good doctors along the way, the pills help some people a lot. Most people, like me, get some help, but we don't have any pill or any procedure that's likely to cure most people. That's unfortunate, and maybe some of the stuff in the labs is going to prove out.
Yes,
But,
and also AI is stepping into that void, Dave. That's what I'm hearing and reading. That there's AI counseling now, where the AI mimics the intimacy of a human being and helps assuage and talk through issues and problems with the client, if you will. Now,
it's
I don't
better
know.
than nothing, is
Yeah,
what the
okay.
studies are saying,
Okay.
but it's not close to what most people really need.
Mhm.
Okay, but talking about the emotional connection is very relevant because we're seeing that happen. And you're seeing it in newspaper stories about people doing things like they're in love with their AI and even using their phone to have a conversation with their AI lover when they're on the beach
Wow.
via their cell phone. This is
Mhm.
common. And it's going to be more and more because, and there's obvious, we had another story we talked about somebody making $30,000 a month with a sex chat application. The chat is getting so good that it can often pass the Turing test. In other words, the chat is so good, it really is so close to what a person would say there that you can't be sure whether it's a person or computer on the other side. That is an incredible achievement.
Yeah.
That has happened. Now, the good chatbots on many topics can mimic humans almost perfectly.
Mhm. And
They
I guess, Dave, as you talk about, some of the how rampant depression is and psychological problems and loneliness and other emotional needs that people have, it almost I imagine to a lot of those folks, it doesn't matter whether they know it's a simulated voice or not. The point is that it's a voice that sounds like somebody real who's paying attention to them and listening to them. So,
and it's gotten really good at that.
mhm.
It's gotten so good that some doctors, when they have a difficult thing to talk about with a patient, some give them news, it's bad news, and the doctor is perhaps young or perhaps dealing with some medical cases that they don't know, actually go to ChatGPT and the like and ask for advice on how best to deal with the patient emotionally.
Are
And
you saying the professionals go to Chat GTP for advice, Dave? Is that what you said?
I say it's even more than that. There have been studies by respected professionals in the universities that the chatbox often gives better advice than most physicians. So how do they judge that? They take the best expert physicians and say, who did a better job? Blind. And this stuff is just getting better and better every week. And let me talk about some of the ways that the AI companions can become convincing.
Okay.
Already, services like 11.ai, which is what Jenny uses in her professional work, sometimes uses it when she needs voiceovers for a video, is so good that Joanna Stern, a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, had one of the AIs pick up her voice, clone it, and fool her own mother. And it's gotten much better since then. That was a few months ago.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that they definitely have ways of being much more natural. For example, in the current voice things, they deliberately occasionally pause like people do. Like I just did because I needed to take a breath.
Right.
And the empathy is not perfect, but it's there, and blind. It's sometimes as good as many professionals.
So it creates the illusion of intimacy, which is what so many of us are looking for. Now, Dave, I saw something that, and that's in one of those stories where they're talking about AI intimacy and cautioning folks about being emotionally attached. What is the whole thing about jailbreaking or open AI? I guess so that it can do things that it wasn't originally programmed to do. Impersonating voices and coaxing people to change their opinions about this, that, or the other. What is that about?
The folks in AI know this just like I know this. In fact, I learn it from the folks, and there are literally dozens of them at a company like OpenAI that are trying to guard against deception from an AI that's harmful. They're also trying to guard against AIs giving information like, how do you blow up a US government building in Oklahoma? What's an effective way to commit suicide without pain? And these things are very well known. They are often asked of AIs, and hence all the major AI companies have large teams trying to figure out how to catch them, catch what's considered harmful, and say, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you about that. And of course, for societal reasons, they are being very careful and avoiding anything of sexual content. There's obviously loads of sources that go right to, in fact, OnlyFans, the major porn site, which has amateurs or semi-amateurs or once amateurs doing their own thing on video pay per minute for their fans, has hired a number of these folks who already have hours and hours of sex talk and sex videos, one-handed, I guess, that they use to create a very realistic AI model of that person. The other thing is that I'm seeing that's worth knowing is that there now are several programs that are very good, not just imitating your voice and the emotional tones, but imitating your face.
Imitating what, Dave?
your face.
Your face.
There
Oh,
is
your facial expression.
superb, yeah, there is
Mhm.
superb lip syncing. So you can write a text or have AI write a text. And not merely does it sound like you or whoever you want to sound like, you want to sound like a 7-year-old girl, it can be done, but can draw and animate a face that not merely is the mouth moving, but the cheeks are moving in a way that is very realistic. And I'm seeing that because that stuff is being created for AI video where they're trying to make it look realistic. It's getting really good. Now, what's the problem with all of this? It is impossible at this point to come even close to a system that somebody knowledgeable can't bust through the guardrails. And in fact, there are a number of people who have done it just to prove it, academics who then give the information to the server saying, this is how I broke through you. Please fix it so nobody else uses it. And people who want to prove that the guardrails don't always work have proved that to my satisfaction and almost everybody else's, and published the findings after they told the companies what they should be fixing to avoid that. One of the simple ways to usually do that is to have the AI translate your original into another language, preferably a relatively obscure one that doesn't have that much uses and the guardrails are less, and then translate it back. That's a way to certainly bust any kind of music copyright and voice copyright. Well, not voice copyright on words that you might say. And it usually works to get through the guardrails. Now, will it be possible to come up with safe AI that cannot do sex talk? Is the society doesn't want sex talk? Everybody except Elon Musk, who's making the large AIs, is avoiding sex. There are lots of smaller ones that are available, but they are definitely breakable. Although they're looking more at how do I make a virus? How do I make a bomb? But it's gotten almost ridiculous in there. I had a story that I headlined, "The Luddites Were Right." And the heart of the story was what I learned in a history class at Columbia years ago. In the Industrial Revolution, in the first half of the 19th century, most people's wages went down significantly. And that's been confirmed right and left since I was in school and heard that. And so that, and what's a spinster? A spinster was a single lady who once upon a time at least could feed herself by spinning cotton. But when the machines came in, some of those people in England starved, as everybody in 1840 reported. There was a revolution against the machines. It was led supposedly by Ned Ludd, who's never been proved to be a real person and might be a legend. So my story that was about the history of what happened with technological change, it was informed by the history. I wanted to put a picture on it. So I asked several of the stories, could you draw a picture of Ned Ludd with a hammer destroying textile machines with a loud crowd behind him?
But you asked AI to generate that, Dave? Is that what you're saying?
I asked several different AIs.
Mm-hmm.
And
What'd they come up with?
Flex came up with a fairly good example of that picture. What do you think ChatGPT said? 3 times I tried it with slight improvements.
I don't know what they said.
They refused to do a picture
Hmm.
because it has not been proven that Ned Ludd is a real person, not just a symbol. So I said after that, and refused to print it. And I said, after that, I changed my wording to say an artist impression of Ned Ludd, and it refused to
Interesting.
make the picture. This is, it also on the first one said that we can't make the picture you want of Ned Ludd swinging a hammer at machines, which is something that was true in history, even if it wasn't personally a person who actually was named Ned Ludd. There were a lot of machines destroyed by the Luddite movement. And they said, we can't give you a picture of a machine being attacked with a hammer because that might encourage violence.
What? Get out of here. All the other stuff they do, and they won't do that? Wow. I'm surprised at that, Dave. That's surprising.
I got the transcripts. I'm going to put them on the web.
Mm-hmm.
That's how far they go because they want to get guardrails that will protect against things that encourage violence. And there's no simple way to do it. So they just censor an awful lot of stuff. How much time do we have left?
We've got about 4 or 5 minutes, Dave. I don't know if we wanted to tackle any of these other items before we sign off. One thing that I found interesting, and this is probably gonna, might resonate with a lot of New Yorkers who, one of the biggest rental markets in the country, if not the biggest. AI is being used, Dave, to price fix with landlords in the rental market.
Massively around the country. I have one story about that from the Nevada Attorney General. What's happened there is a couple of services aimed at landlords to give them advice on how to make the most money. Very successful. And one of the pieces of advice they do is they look at the market and calculate what's the most you can get from the apartment like this. And they tell the landlord, charge this amount, much more than you would have ordinarily increased rents to. Now, when almost all the big landlords in a territory use software like this, they come together and rents go up. The New York Attorney General is going at it. The FTC is going at it. As I say, the Nevada Attorney General has jumped in because that is an effective way of price fixing enabled by AI and happening widely across the United States.
Wow.
Serious questions, the Google antitrust case and things like that, the $4 billion fines the Europeans are putting onto the giant companies, there's definitely thought behind them that makes sense to me, maybe to you.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I'm happy to see, the fines of that magnitude, I think, get these giant companies' attention because historically the fines have been slap on the wrists and they just keep moving just as a cost of doing business. But now I think it has risen to a whole nother level, and I'm hoping to see some shift on a global level because it is a global problem. You got global companies that are having a massive, massive impact across the planet, and we got to keep our eye on that. Okay, Dave. Thank you, Dave, for your insight today. Appreciate it.
So long, everybody.
Okay, this has been Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, every Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. Also on the web at whcr.org. Tune in. Just might learn something. Good night.